evaluating what he thinks the utility is worth. He suggested that perhaps look at the offer that was made in 2008 that was rejected, and maybe consider that it's not quite worth that any longer, as seeing as how the intermodal is a load that they're serving now, whereas before it might have been a load that Gardner might have served prior to those discussions. So they don't seem to have, I contacted them, they don't seem to have an appetite, they don't seem like they're interested in pursuing this.
But really, that's not a really valid appraisal of the utility's worth. And that's kind of what we all agreed to do, was to get into the nuts and bolts and find out what things really were worth. And besides that, it'd be a good comparison to find out if, as he says, it's gone backwards in value, which I highly doubt. And I would guess it's probably increased in value. So, I mean, you talked to one person. I think, don't you think we ought to let the staff do the legwork?
Actually, I think that 5 out of 6 people on the governing body would just as soon not continue to discuss option number 3.
4.
Yeah, 4, sorry.
Well, the only thing that I will say about that, and this is one thing that I've struggled with, because we've had a lot of conversations about this, and we went through the ordinance for when the electric board was in place, and we identified things that we liked about that, and I think we made appropriate changes based on those things. The only thing that we've discussed that I feel is outstanding, and I don't know if people still feel it's an issue or not, is the fact that there's this fear that the governing body is going to use the utilities to basically raise that money for other things, right? And in my opinion, if that is a valid fear, there's really only 2 ways you ever fix that, and that is selling the utility or creating a BPU like Kansas City, Kansas. Because no matter what we do here, if we create a board of public utilities for a charter ordinance, 2 years down the road, you can have a council that comes in, and if they want that money, they're just going to repeal the ordinance. I mean, so if that's a concern, I mean, if that is truly a concern that is driving this, selling the utilities really is then one of the only options to fix that concern. Now, if that's not a concern anymore, then, I mean, that's a different story. But if that is truly the concern that's driving all of this, that's the only way that you're going to totally eliminate the thought or the concern of the governing body coming in and taking money.
I think, obviously, it's a concern we've seen in comments and other things, but I think most of us can probably agree it's a little bit of an unfounded concern. The change itself wouldn't have changed that. That money's always been available to the city. It's never been used. So, though it's a concern that's been expressed, it's been an unfounded concern because the changes that have been put in place now, the changes that would be put in place short of selling and going into a KCK model, wouldn't change that in the least. Now so I think some of the comments have been directed in fact, well, if you do this, you'll have access to it. We have access to it. That's not going to change. So while I've heard that concern, I won't say that I appreciate it completely because it's fair to ask, but I don't think you're looking at the total history of it when you express that concern, because then you don't truly understand what's been in place before, because it's been there. So I see you're absolutely right. The only way to eliminate that, but are you eliminating concern that's never presented itself to be historically relevant?
Yeah, in my
and I don't think
are.
so.
And
I really don't.
I've never agreed that was the reason that this was being done.
Exactly.
I don't disagree that it could happen, but my whole point is, if that's really one of the main drivers, then that's the only way to fix it. I mean, what the other options on here are never going to eliminate that risk.
I would like to point out in the recommendations that I made, and the first one of the recommendations was that the Public Utility Commission would make recommendations to the city in utility accounting, billing, and finance. including setting of utility rates and all associated fees and penalties, and budget development and initiatives to include utility fund balance development and capital equipment replacement fund development. You know, I sat through some EUB meetings where they talked about, why they were establishing these funds, and there's, you know, there's some industry best practices that are probably at play there, and if we had a new utility director, you know, we could establish these funds, not just for electric, but for water and for wastewater. And not only that, it's something that could be reviewed every year at budget time.
So are we saying there's a consensus on the governing body to remove option 4? I think there is.
I think it's consensus, yeah.
I'm in support. I don't think it's, like I said before, I don't think that's the best direction. I don't think it's the best service to the taxpayers. I'd rather them be who you're ultimately held responsible to instead of investors and otherwise, which we'd see in a private corporation. So I think long-term, you'd be able to plan and work for the right people, so to speak.
I wouldn't sell it either. I think we have a unique advantage because we do own our own utilities. And with upcoming economic development opportunities, we could use our utility in ways we haven't been, like maybe rate.
Economic development riders,
So,
something like that.
so I would not be for selling it.
Okay. So we've got a consensus that we're not interested in pursuing 4 and 5, which just leaves us with 1, 2, and 3 at this point. What is the consensus of council on placing the electric department back within the Public Works Department? Who here is in favor of that?
I mean, to me, I don't understand how that's any different than number 2. I mean, because water and wastewater is under Public Works, right?
Sure.
So, I mean, I'm just assuming that structurally they may have a unique director, but not, it's still the same, basically the same structure, I mean.
Well, it falls in the same spot in the organizational chart. But, yeah, I think my feelings on it are that the utilities are the only thing that we charge for a fee for every month. We've got a meter on all these houses and properties. We charge a fee for it every month. We send the bills out every month. We're not charging, you know, their property taxes as part of that bill. It really truly is the one section of our municipal government here that operates more like a you know, a standard business, CenturyLink or South or anything else. So, I think that it is different because it provides for its own director that only pays attention to the utilities, and so I'm just trying to get and see, is that one we should still be discussing, Steve?
Yeah,
You've been wanting to say something.
I see 2 differences, major differences between the 2. The first one is, obviously, the reporting structure is different. You've got a utilities director that reports directly to the city administrator in option 2. Whereas in option 3, everything would be falling under Ryan, who would then report to the city administrator. The second thing is, option 2 incorporates the advisory board where option 3 is not. So, basically, option 3 will be disbanding the advisory board, and everything would be under the city umbrella without any outside advisement. So, those are the 2 big differences that I see. Am I correct on that?
Yes, that's the way that I see it. That's how I tried to spell it out in the recommendation.
All right.
And anybody else comments, or anybody else want to lobby for option number 3 there?
Yeah, I mean.
Well, I was waiting for you to say something. I know this is the way that you want to see it.
Well, you know, why don't we peel off, you know, the police department and put it under a board as well? I mean, what's left of a city councilman's job after you take the largest 3 portions of the budget, I'm assuming they're the largest 3 portions of the budget, away? I mean, what do we do here? And why would anyone as a resident or as a voter, well, I guess one and the same, why would they ever want to give the power to